Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, according to a recent study by Cal State University San Bernardino, in U.S. largest cities, hate crimes in 2020 actually decreased by 6%. But in direct contrast, anti-Asian hate crimes increased by over 145%. Well, here to give us a little perspective and hopefully a little hope, I'm delighted to be joined by the council member from the 12th District, John Lee. So nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
Well, it's a terrifying statistic, and I think we all became aware of the surge against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and it was sort of blamed on political rhetoric. Do you think that that is where this started?
I think it's just another example of scapegoating the Asian American community. Throughout our history here in America, unfortunately, we have some incidents that are very similar to what's happening now. The Exclusion Act, where because of the declining wages in the West Coast, where Chinese Americans probably made up 0.002% of the workforce, right, but they were blamed for it, and so actions were taken against them, whether it was the internment camps where Japanese Americans were being held. And this is just another example where, unfortunately, sometimes leaders use things to deflect and need someone to point at as the reason for whatever the problems are, and this is just another example of that.
So a lot of these incidences may or may not be a hate crime. So what's the legal definition of a hate crime?
Legal definition of hate crime is when a crime occurs when someone is targeted because of their membership or perceived membership of a certain group or demographic. Unfortunately, some examples of hate speech aren't considered that because they're covered under the First Amendment, but it's really when people are perceived attacks against them because they're part of a certain group.
There have been these incidences against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, but now there's just more attention to it and we're hearing about it more. Obviously there is an increase, but do you think the attention is also shining a light on it?
Absolutely. I think these types of hate crimes have been happening for a long time now, but like you said, the attention is on it. But now we're seeing these incredibly egregious attacks on people who are the elderly in the Asian American community that are the most vulnerable part of our community is being attacked for no reason. My own mother, who immigrated to this country in 1962, is an American, a proud American, is afraid to leave her apartment because of fear of what's going on in these attacks. And so, while I think they've always been, the highlight is there now, and so just more attention, which is something where, we've asked the communities, because sometimes, whether it be for cultural reasons or a language barrier or even fear, that we haven't been reporting what has been happening out there. And I think right now, because of the attention, people are more, feel more free to be able to report what's happening to them. So it's always been there, unfortunately.
I do want to talk about the reporting part of it, but you just mentioned something that is highly personal to you. Mm-hmm. What do you say to your mom? I mean, you are a person that has been in public service your whole life. You are in a position of authority. You are in a position of awareness. What do you say to your mom on the phone when she says, John, I don't want to go out?
Well, honestly, I don't know what to say. I don't blame her for that fear. We've seen it over and over. Even recently, a woman who's not even of Asian background, a Hispanic woman, on a bus here in our area. Someone thought that she was of Chinese descent and just started attacking her right on the bus. Fractured her face, bruised up, for no reason. The elderly lady, 85 years old, just getting off a bus, and someone just out of the blue attacked her. These are things that they're truly palpable. This fear that unfortunately so many people in the Asian community are feeling right now, and it's a scary time.
What are some of the subtle nuance things that are happening that we may not know about in the news or in the newspaper?
Well, I've really never seen the Asian communities, right? There's so many different numbers of Asian communities really coming together right now. not as different communities, but as one, trying to work together on what should our short-term goals be, what are those long-term goals. I often say that, I love this country, but I also love my heritage, my Korean background, and celebrate the different cultures, but that doesn't make me any less American or make me love this country any less. And I think that's an experience that a lot of Asian Americans, unfortunately, have felt.
What is the model minority myth?
Right. So, the model minority is always, it's an unfortunate term that was brought up really almost to pit Asian Americans against other minority groups. And it was to paint us in a light where, we understood what it meant to get ahead, and we understood that hard work got you here. Whether they're negative or even so-called positive stereotypes, it's always dangerous when you sort of pigeonhole a person into one sort of class or one type of, representing an entire class of people, that everything fits into that one box of who you are. One of the experiences I remember being a kid, and this was in junior high school, one of my math teachers could not understand why I was struggling in math. And it was just, as a 12 or 13-year-old, really, how do you answer that? Like, I don't understand. Why aren't you better in math, John? Like all the other Asian kids are, excelling in this. And it's almost like I needed some extra help in that area. But because of that perceived notion that somehow, maybe I was just slacking. I was just not trying hard enough. I didn't get that extra attention. It was more just put on me like, well, you're just not trying hard enough, John, where, that's an unfortunate, that positive stereotype, that so-called positive stereotype actually hurt me. And so, that's a, personal experience that I can relate to, and it's just an unfortunate thing, especially when you find out the history of it and how it was used to sort of pit, groups against each other.
Well, you have recently introduced a legislative package for funding and training and education to sort of combat, these hate crimes across a broad swath. So what is this that you've introduced, and what do you want it to be able to achieve?
Well, any time that you can collect the data and really try to understand what is really going on, that only leads to better legislation. So right now we're in that data collecting phase,
okay,
right? And trying to not only collect that data, but to have a campaign around reaching out to the different communities and letting them know what is a hate crime, when do they report something, why that is so important that you don't just let this incident go by. It's unfortunate right now when we all see this light at the end of the tunnel of coming out of this pandemic, and businesses are trying to, a lot of business owners in predominantly Asian communities are feeling that fear of, okay, we're finally coming out of this, but now I'm really afraid of, being targeted. You can't just be a bystander anymore. You have to speak up, and when you see something happening, be that person to offer that support to, to that situation.
We should also just say, what's going on in the 12th? What's happening?
We're so excited about that light at the end of the tunnel, but we all still recognize that a lot of people are still hurting. And, we have done an incredible job at trying to understand the problems that are happening to our businesses, to people who have lost their jobs, and really set up some great programs so that if you're facing food insecurity, to know that, again, our office should be that office that you reach out to, because there's ways that we can help you. If you're a struggling business, to keep your doors open. We've done everything to try to make sure that when this economy is up, back and running again in full strength, that my district comes back in full force. But as all this is coming to end, how important it is to bring community back.
Well, this has been a true pleasure to talk with you. So
well,
thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.